to some of what I consider the major issues within the system structure, except that we concede on the question of the curriculum, and I will explain that at some future point. We want to accuse the government of a lack of transparency in its treatment of the system of education in this country. We want to accuse the government of a lack of accountability. We want to accuse the government of having wasted millions of dollars in projects that have yielded nothing. There's no doubt that this government has started a lot of projects and that they have never completed them. And again, we spoke of this in relation to other areas in which government has management of public institutions. And we want to accuse the government of selling a lot of buzzwords in relation to education and education reform. Now, we began by saying that this ministry, of all the ministries, is allocated $700 million, and that there is a reason for that. And the reason is that Barbados, more than any other island in the Caribbean, has made and deliberately made a greater investment in education, one, than it has made in any other area of human life in this country. And it has made a greater investment in education per capita than most of the other islands. That was demonstrated when I was privileged to be a student at the University of the West Indies. And one of the first things we noted was that the complement of Barbadian students tended to be the children of working class people. The majority of students at that place were working class students, were the children of working class people, whereas the students from the other islands, and mainly the smaller islands, tended to be the children of middle and sometimes upper middle class parents. So that, again, what happened in 1961 is so significant, it is so revolutionary, and we don't tell ourselves enough about that. Yes, there are flaws, there are faults in the system, but what happened in 1961 is an event more significant than any other of the pivotal events to which I referred earlier. Now, it is now a matter of regret that we've had the estimates by this open format where the minister comes and he or she brings the public servants, and within the last 3 years, education has not been subjected to inquiry. And one must ask the question, why? If we recognize that the system is so important to this society, why hasn't the ministry exposed itself to the scrutiny of even self-congratulatory colleagues, nor even this office holder? And that is a matter of some suspicion, if not regret. And we ask this government, why has the Ministry of Education been able to amble along, and I use the word quite deliberately, amble along without public inquiry? And if you don't have public inquiry, you're unlikely to have public accountability. And this ministry has not given satisfactory public accountability. But I'm saying this ministry, this is one of the strangest events in the life of this country. We have grown used to a Ministry of Education and if you have two, and we've had two before, because again, it's so important, we are now, there's now this bifurcation, that's all I can call it, this bifurcation of education in Barbados at governmental level, and we are not sure who is who and who is doing what. One is not certain. We have this way of attempting to fix things that sometimes ought to be left alone. The BBC News has been starting with that sound probably for the last 100 years, and nobody has seen anything wrong with it. They do it. That is what you call a tradition. If something becomes a tradition because it has virtue, and I have not seen anything that is without virtue in relation to governmental involvement in education. You have a minister of education, and that minister deals with all areas of education, and if the workload is too heavy, you have a minister of state in the ministry, and it is so important. You probably have 2 ministers of state or 2 junior ministers, whatever you choose to call them, or as would have happened in previous dispensations, a minister and a parliamentary secretary. What is happening now, I think, is a little confusing, and I don't see a bright future. I probably should be shy about saying this, but I am being told that the performance on the Sunday Brass Stat Show did not give people any confidence that things will make any progressive change. This is a ministry that certainly requires more substance and less fluff, and all these plans and this mountain in labor giving birth to a mouse eventually. The same platitudes, the same cliches, and nobody is happy that we're on the road to any transformation that is needed in education. I want to accuse this government of having failed in education, where the predecessors such as Sir James Cameron Tudor, Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, certainly men who made education what it was, these serious men. You commit themselves to the task of education, and they did it. For many years, I used to wonder, for example, why doesn't everybody have a 6th form? I mean, that was such obvious discrimination against bright people. You reach 5th form and you had to be scrambling all around trying to get into a 6th form school, and 6th form schools by definition had a greater prestige. And as an egalitarian, you always wondered, but why not 6th form? So I want to pause and commend Mr. Ronald Jones, who seems to have done it without much fuss. It was something that needed to be done, and Mr. Ronald Jones did it. So wherever he is tonight, if he's awake, he will hear me say that he is to be commended for making that significant change, that development in education in Barbados, where he gave 6th forms to schools, and it was more than an act of giving a 6th form. It was giving schools greater prestige and giving those schools a greater place within academia. You will forgive me, Your Honor, if I say something about EduTech. The people who have been in education for the last 30, 40 years do not ever regard EduTech with much fondness. Many of them feel that it was too expensive. I mean, $500 million at that time was a lot of money. And while there may have been some limited success, nobody working in that EduTech system was able to come away and describe it as a resounding success. But that is a cliche, and I don't like using cliches. But was it successful? Is the jury still out on EduTech? What has it done? Maybe the revolution in these iPhones and so on are doing more for our children's education technology than the $500 million did back in the 90s and early 2000s. We cannot say that it has been an overwhelming success, although, of course, technology is so much more efficient now, so it is probably easier to adapt to, and still we say that perhaps the $500 million may have been better spent. EduTech, I cannot say to this country, has been a success. But that is to look back. And we often look back for the sake of making our look forward more rational. And we want to be guided by models of success. And EduTech, I don't think, has been a model of success. But we come to this thing, transformation. One may want to accuse the government of a buzzword, transformation, and education transformation. And what are we doing with all these transformations? What really are we doing? I will tell this public what the government has been doing. The greater transformation has occurred in the changes of ministers, because in 6.5 years, this government has had 4 ministers and 1 parliamentary secretary. Now, that does not speak well for stability in government. That does not speak well for a ministry as important as education. What was happening in government that caused this government to employ 4 different ministers in such a short space of time? I grew up and everybody knew, we used to call him Mr. Sandiford, was the education minister, and there was a certain permanence, there was a certain stability. The lack of permanence and the instability in education reflects itself in these multiple persons temporarily populating the offices of such an important ministry and rotating through without an opportunity to settle and establish or to promote what the government lovingly calls transformation. We've had 2 directors of education reform and 2 communications consultants again. We're into that embattled area. This government does nothing unless it adorns the office with a consultant. Everywhere across the public service, there's this presence called a consultant. Nobody knows how much they're paid. Nobody knows if they work from 8 to 4 or 9 to 12. Nobody knows, but they're handsomely rewarded from all reports, and they're called consultants. So they're lucky. They're lucky. Again, this education transformation, as this government is wont to do, was started with an expensive launch and these town hall meetings and all glitz and a lot of pretty events. And that is always a sign that when you have a big party, the life after the big party tends to lack serious activity. Policies and initiatives are to be implemented, and all these promises, and those promises have been followed by nothing except uncertainty and confusion, failed promises and unmet timelines, no clear use of sharing data to drive decision making, no clear vision or direction. Indeed, we may say to you, Your Honor, that the failure in EduTech is repeating itself in present failures. I don't like calling names in here, but let me remind the people of this country through you, sir, as to the promises that were made over the last 3 years, only 3 years. Miss Denny, and I apologize if I must make her name the content of this debate, Ms. Ida Mae Denny in 2022 said, and I quote, "Having had the common entrance for the last," I'll read that again, sir. "Having had the common entrance for the last time this year, that is in 2022, we are proposing that the first set of students transitioning under the new structure will transition in September 2023. This is the important 11+ exam about which I spoke so seriously a few minutes ago before the recess, sir. Before the dinner recess. And here was a high official. I think that person was also a consultant. Lucky person. Luckiest people in Barbados now are consultants. You're getting a lot of money, nobody knows how much, but you get a lot. And I say no more on that. But here she was in 2022, telling the people of this country, the children, the teachers, and the parents, that the common entrance would be done for the last time this year, and that's 2022. The honorable member for St. Michael Southeast in 2021 would have told this country, and not would have told the country, the common entrance will soon be a thing of the past. That's in 2021. The present Minister of Economic Affairs, the honorable member for St. Philip West, well, maybe a personality trait, succeeded in saying nothing. Miss Archer Bradshaw in 2023 told the country that a proposal would be with the cabinet by January 2024. Mountains in labor. The Honorable Prime Minister, with the voice of authority in 2024, said the transformation will now begin in 2026. And so we're like Punka. We're beginning in 2023. In 2021, it will soon be a thing of the past. The honorable member for St. Philip West wisely says nothing. The chief education officer in 2023 says she is heading off to the cabinet by January 2024, and in 2024, presumably she headed off to the cabinet, and the Honorable Prime Minister and member for St. Michael Northeast says, okay, we're ready now, 2026. Well, that is a promise that is still left to be kept. It is clear that the government will not go through with that promise. If the government were doing so, it would be the ultimate irresponsibility that you're making that transition in 2026, while your attention seems to be on what date you wish to go to the public and ask them how much they love you. On Sunday, the incumbent, I don't know if he is senior to the honorable member for St. James South, or whether she is senior to him. She certainly is senior to him, because the people of St. James South had a decision, they made a decision, and they decided that she should make the journey here every Tuesday. And so that is something that they will have to resolve. They have to get together in there one day and ask each other, look, who is the boss about here? Am I senior to you? Are you senior to me? Let us go to the Prime Minister and find out. But you can't say find out who is the man about here or who is man about here. But find out, so as to avoid conflict. I don't know if they're in the same building. I don't know, we don't know if they're in the same building, but they have to sort this confusion out. This confusion in government. But here's Mr. Blackman. Interestingly enough, he is the one who appears on the program, and the honorable member for St. James South keeps her characteristic silence, and he says on Sunday, 2025, that he will take a proposal to cabinet this year. And he adds, for good measure, discussions are ongoing. He has not warmed the seat for a fortnight, but he is having ongoing discussions. You see, when people, language must always bear a relationship to reality. It must always have meaning. And the good gentleman has just warmed the seat. And he is speaking of ongoing discussions. So I don't know who came to him and on went, if that's a word. But language. What are you talking about? How could you have ongoing discussions when you just went into the people's place? Well, we don't know who is senior in there. As I said, he and the honorable member for St. James South will have to decide who is the boss in there. As I said, I don't know if they're in the same building. I hope they're not, because this government has, in recent times, been showing itself to be capable of much dissension. And I'm going to refer to that very shortly, because one of the other myths pervading the halls of public life is that this government is some very stable entity. And we have recently had two significant departures from the government, and it is not a matter for any major discussion. It happened, people say, oh yes, that just happened, and life goes on. We are still one happy band of travelers across the corridors of power. But there is still much dissension within this government. That is demonstrably evident. And we have said previously that it is none of our business. We are going to keep it that way. We know what we are about. We know what we are doing. We know where we are going. And it is only the goodly Prime Minister that will tell us when we are likely to get there. Since this government is jaded, this government is clearly a government in decline. This clearly is a government that is not relating to the expectations, the aspirations of people, and certainly in terms of education, this government has visited the people of this country with uncertainty. It is a very erratic government in terms of its policy. It has played games with the common entrance exam. I gave the testimony of a gentleman who regarded that common entrance as a life-changing event. And here is this government continuing to lose the trust of the people by being so uncertain in relation to an event which deals with the transfer of a person from primary to secondary school. There are three. This is education, and I'm just demonstrating how this government has functioned in relation to education. And I say that this government has done more to destabilize education than any other destabilizer that possibly could have influenced the unhappy progress of education in this country. I start with this one, the Teaching Service Commission. This government promised, I think, the people of this country that they would establish the Teaching Service Commission. Has it happened? Somebody will answer. This government told the people of this country last year that effective September the 1st, master teachers will be assigned across our schools to support teacher effectiveness and improve instructional equality. Did that happen? The answers to the first two questions are no, sir. This government said that 75% tax credit for the provision of educational and life skills facilities for persons with special needs to encourage the private sector to invest in this area, and B, a 50% tax credit for the provision of educational centers for gifted persons. That is the characteristic language of the government. Very pretty. Always sounds like something exciting is about to happen. there goes that mountain in labor. There runs from its underbelly a weak little mouse. Nothing happens. So that those events to which I refer reflect government's incompetence or inertia, and often one is as a result of the other. They evidence government's inertia in relation to the project in education, and you cannot afford to fail with education, because if you fail with education, this country fails. And this country has succeeded because education succeeded. And we must understand that. But here's the fallout now. Here's the fallout. Here's what is happening in Barbados inexplicably. While, as I said earlier, a ministry has been populated by 6 ministers. Is that the number I gave, sir? 6 ministers in a short period of time. I beg your pardon, sir. 4 ministers in 6 years. 4 ministers in 6 years. And here is how education has been treated. Every week. I understand that there's one school now that closed because of rats. They're so predictable, Your Honor. Closed because of rats. Sick buildings, plants, and properties. Every day, every week. Has it ever been like this? Or did you and I, sir, go to school in conditions that we found tolerable or acceptable in spite of the deficiencies? I don't remember that Wesley Hall was without its dust on the floor, but I suppose we were more hardy human beings then and we could endure it. But people now, children now don't play as much as they used to, so perhaps they're more susceptible or vulnerable to sick buildings and that kind of thing. But every day, every week in this country, there's sick building syndrome. And I say plants, the cow-itch. How do these things happen? I don't understand it. Simple issues. And I hate to call the names of schools, but we held a meeting, a public meeting, very successful. This will distress the other side. Very successful public meeting recently. And right next to a school, in the middle of the term, the grass on what ought to have been a little play area for the children, the grass is high. This government in here came in here a few weeks ago and penalized citizens for tall grass. And government is the main offender. And I'm not going to call the name of the school because it may reflect on the principal and the senior teachers and so on. So I will leave them to live frustrated lives under the management of a government that simply does not care. And so we have a lot of frustrated and unsupported teachers and leaders and education officers. The people of this country need to know this, that often when a problem appears to be simple, there is a reason. There's some factor which is precipitous of that problem. And so education continues to be a troubled area of life in this country. Do we know, for example, does the public know, for example, that the common entrance and CHC results are constantly declining? We have a lot of unhappy parents in this country, and I'm a parent, and I know how unhappy. Look, I say children are the greatest joy and the greatest pain. And a lot of parents suffer because the children don't commit to exam success. And that's so painful. You're going along during the day and nothing. There are things that potentially could make you unhappy, but a child's unhappiness or a child's lack of success is the greatest source of unhappiness for a parent. So that These declining common entrance and CXC results are not only injurious of the children's morale, but the parents do suffer a lot as well. We have increasing numbers of students leaving school without qualifications. In a modern democracy, remember what I said about Plato. Show me a democracy, and I will show you a tyranny in the making. This tyranny has long-lasting and far-reaching effects. The tentacles of tyranny, the tentacles that sap the morale of people who are nominally heading institutions, who are not allowed to function. That tyranny will have its consequences for those who populate these institutions. And I'm not only talking about schools, I'm talking about an entire public service in which public officers, traditional public officers, are not allowed to function because there's a very happy man or woman in there calling himself a consultant, and quite often he gets $15,000 a month. And that used to be a secret before he said it. Violence in schools. This WhatsApp phenomenon would make you believe that every child, the average age, 13, 14, that they fight and pull each other's hair all day. So I hope it is exaggerated. I spoke to a young student some time ago, and he was saying, look, they really do it for the camera. But whether they do it for the camera or not, it is a problem. It is a problem that disparages an entire country, because people looking out are wondering, well, what's going on in Barbados? Or people in the diaspora must now be wondering, because they see them as well. What is happening with schools in Barbados? Where did this violence come from? And that violence, obviously, that school violence, obviously is connected to something else. The fights that take place are criminal offenses, as you know, sir. And what is happening in our schools? Have the teachers retreated? Have the teachers withdrawn? Where are the principals? Well, let me tell you where the principals are, sir. Because a man goes to bed a Sunday night in St. Philip, and he wakes up the Monday morning, start of the school term, and discovers that he is no longer a few miles away from his school, comfortable miles, that he has to travel all the way to the north of the island to assume new duties as a principal, so that you break the stability in the school. No principal can settle into a school. And I'm addressing a parliament that contains teachers, former or present, and they know, the honorable member for St. Thomas knows that it cannot be good for a school to have a principal assigned there for 1 or 2 years. She knows that. The honorable member knows that. And if she supports me, the honorable member supports me on nothing else, her voice will sound in support of what I'm saying, and it will not be unwitting nor accidental support. The honorable member, I confidently assert, supports me in my thesis, my proposition, that you cannot and must not and will not have a principal transferred from a school after a year or 2. And that you do not wake him late in the night on Sunday night and place him in a different school. You're injuring the school and you're injuring the gentleman. Why do you do this? Why are these simple mistakes repeating themselves in education? Nobody knows why. Nobody knows why, sir. But that is how the government is functioning. Is it in keeping with the government's behavior of favoritism? That there's no space in this government for merit, that somebody got to like you, and if somebody says that they want to be at X school, they have to be there and dislocate the children and dislocate the teacher and upset the culture, because every principal is responsible for a culture that emerges in the school. His style and content influences. Perhaps he may like cricket, may like sports, And you put him in there and 3-4 years down the road, he has a successful athletics team, a successful cricket team. That's how it happens. It starts with an influential adult. And that is not high philosophy. Everybody knows that. So that we're calling on this government to stop this arbitrary practice of just dislocating principles and scattering them across the educational system as if they're draftsmen on a board. And our children, I hate cliches, but our children are constantly falling through the proverbial cracks. And I go back to the brass tacks program. I'm not focusing on the goodly gentleman unfairly, but if you occupy this high office and this important office, there must be some gravitas. Display your mettle. Say who you are, what you intend to do, what is your worth, what is your value. Demonstrate that you're not there as some personal favor. And I'm told that after 2 hours and 15 minutes of an appearance on a radio show, I am open to attack, no problem. I got it on the night that I spoke in here, and the whole of the next day, I didn't listen to one of them the next day, but I'm told that there was a festival of abuse the next day. Everything you could find. Well, I thought I was on my way to prison. When they told me the things that were said, I said, well, logically, one of them next time I come here will do a citizen's arrest and hurry me off. But I hope this gentleman does not similarly believe that this is any personal attack. But when you occupy this office, demonstrate some competence in the office. And I want to say to I think her name is Dr. Reed, that it was an abuse of power that took her out of, that disturbed her ambitions in St. James North, but that is to digress. You see, people think that corruption is just about putting your hand in a cookie jar. As I've said before, corruption is an abuse of power. And this favoritism that this government continues to practice, even within its walls, is evidence of breakdown. That's why the ministers are here now treating each other like strangers. And that is to put it mildly. But we're on education. And I have digressed. What is missing, sir? Missing from education is an inadequate collection and use of data. Nobody's doing that. There's insufficient intervention at early childhood and primary level. We've been saying that certainly during the course of this address, that nobody knows what is happening to these children in early childhood and at the primary level. This is an extremely difficult society to live in. We lived in a society, there was less technology, there was less of everything. There were less material goods. We lived in an environment of values. These children live in an environment of materialism. Everything is around them. And the greater the materialism, ironically enough, the mind and the soul remains deficient, disconnected, disjoined from good values. And that is what the children have to endure, sir. And we don't have, or if we do, we have too few people at the primary level paying attention to the difficulties that confront the lives of children. This one is serious. Over-politicizing of the decision-making processes. A school and a primary school is not a battleground nor even a playground for politicians to be manipulating people. Government, let the professionals run the thing. So that there is political destruction being wrought in primary schools as there is political destruction being wrought in the police service. And I will come to the police service. Let us stay with the schools for the time being. These are serious problems, Your Honor, that are developing within education because the long tentacles of political managers are interfering with progress and development. And where there needs to be an intervention that is positive, the schools are not getting it, the children are not getting it, and there's much suffering. Why you think the children behave in the way they are? Neglect. No value systems, no values tuition, no moral tuition, no expertise present. And as I've said, a lot of the professionals, teachers, I suppose, are in retreat. And they tell you that the children are bringing the habits into the school, that the schools are not creating it. And the schools probably are not fighting back. And if the government is interested in fighting back, the government would establish a human complement to assist with these deep problems in the schools. As I've said before, a child does not fail his 11 plus outright. And when I say outright, I mean a child does not get knocked on the day of the exam. That child has been failing that exam long before the morning on which he sat in that chair and before that desk. So that, again, there's been no concrete policy for inclusive education. The last one was in 1995. No revision of legislation and policies to be fit for this 21st century. You have an ineffective, top-heavy Ministry of Education structure. We have a word in Barbados, McGuffey. McGuffey's all over the place. Everybody is a McGuffey. Big titles, consultants. And when the public goes into rebellion, you callously rid the place of the consultant. Not to be heard from again. No real, practical, genuine consultation with stakeholders. As I said earlier, one day, a teacher told me one day, well, they called her and told her come up to the University of the West Indies, take down under a tank, for them to tell her what would be the future of the 11 plus. And they went up there and they sat down and everybody looked at each other. And we are where we are now. No integration of education with the other social sectors. That's the point I hinted at earlier. And I came up in a tradition, as did you, sir. There was a marriage between the church and the school. Indeed, my first school was in a church hall, Grace Hill, Moravian Church on Sundays, school during the week. Robert, that's your school, sir. Church on Sundays, school during the week. And it was more than that institutional connection, values. And I was telling a colleague of mine recently this week, very healthy discussion, that the schools used to start almost with a church service. With a church service. I'm no expert on schools, but is that sacred moment still existent within our educational system? Are we ashamed? Are we ashamed of religion? And some people may resist religion, but are we ashamed of our belief in the existence of God? And if we cling to that belief, we bring a chaplain in here every Tuesday, and that is religious, and that is Christian. And if that is the case, do we do it as a ritual, or do we do it with meaning? And if we're not doing it, what message are we sending to our children? That when we tell them about our school experience, and that it has made us into reasonably good people with our sins or faults or shortcomings, and that their lives are so different, how do we justify this changing paradigm in which we do not feed the souls of our children. And if it is happening, I'm happy. And the school at People's Cathedral will not mind that I say that I was extremely impressed driving in one day and seeing what looked like a real church service, and the children were in there with the adult members of the church. And I thought, this is such a beautiful start to the day. Such a beautiful start to the day. It must have impacted. I learned my Anglican hymns, not from an Anglican church because I'm not an Anglican. I learned my Anglican hymns and loved them from secondary school. Absolutely love them. It feeds your soul, sir. What is happening in the schools now? Anybody knows? I certainly don't. But I hope that our children are being encouraged. And I hope that the institution of education is being encouraged to restore the place of spiritual engagement. People are afraid of the word religion, of spiritual engagement, even if it is ethics. There's a place for values in the schools. Another thing that's missing, no robust technology infrastructure, no policy or training, no sustainable long-term planning. These are all problems within education. Let us come to some specifics. I believe that the government has boasted that Alma Paris will be restored. Alma Paris has been problematic because there has probably been no testing to determine the needs and causes of learning deficits for appropriate interventions. The master teachers, so promised, no clear role, no clear plan for deployment. Safety officers and counselors, not enough across all the schools. Would you permit me, sir, to disclose that when the government recently decided to put security officers in schools, we thought that it was going to be the traditional security firm, not the security firm, the traditional security department. And I must not be afraid to speak against injustice. But everything this government does is a deal. Everything this government does is a transaction. And sir, I'm not going to call the name of a private security firm that has been implanted into security in schools, but please, government, stop wasting money on private security firms and spend the traditional amounts on government security guards. Everything is a transaction. Every institution is contaminated by a deal, by a transaction. If that is wrong, if my information is incorrect, I will apologize. But I'm not about to apologize unless I hear that it is incorrect. And I am persuaded that my information is correct. That you are augmenting the resources of friends. Again, I say, when you could have had the traditional government security guards, who, as you know, sir, from the situation in the courts, the government security guard offers a different temperament, a different relationship. He or she sees himself or herself as permanent, and they almost become a part of the institution. The private firm does not have that perception of the place. It's another contract. And you may be shipped off to another school the next week. And all these things infect the institution of education, contaminate the institution of education, but we don't think of this because making a deal with a friend is always more important with this government. Get vexed with me. Teacher training. No curriculum reform or technology in place to use skills learned. Have to be retrained. So a gentleman or a lady gets trained He sits there, he stagnates, nothing happens, and the training goes. The effects of that training dissipate, and he goes back to who he was before. Digital literacy / robotics, no tertiary accreditation, no path afterwards, no decent internet or digital tools in schools. 30 years after EduTech. 30 years after EduTech. No decent internet or digital tools in schools. And we walking around here claiming that EduTech was this massive success. And some schools cannot have a decent internet or digital tool. Well, I made reference to the national school. Life in education has been a lot of damage has been done. 4 ministers later, and what we heard on Sunday does not give cause for hope and optimism. Hope is based on faith, optimism is based on the evidence of faith, and we have no evidence that things are likely to improve in the schools anytime soon. I will end by, as I've said, the child who fails the 11+, there's insufficient intervention at early childhood. There's insufficient diagnosis. There are not enough counselors. A counselor used to be when I was at school, the teacher was everything. Counsel, do everything, flog you, counsel you when they feel like. But the secondary schools are following the same model as the primary schools, unhappily. And there's specialist teachers needed in this new age. It is not happening. What do we need to do? We need to improve physical and technological infrastructure at all schools. We need to empower educators, not empower criminals, empower educators and leaders at all levels, have supportive mechanisms for all students and parents. We need to strengthen communities in and around the schools, and that's interesting. We do that because traditionally there was an organic relationship between the school and the communities. The simple act of having a youth club in those good old days, and the president of the youth club or the secretary would go to the watchman on Friday night and ask for the keys, and you became a part of that building, and you returned the keys, and eventually you established a good relationship with, we call them headmistresses then, or the headmaster, and that revealed a true organic relationship between the community and the school. And eventually there would be some drive to clean the school, and the club would clean the school. Life used to be so good in this place. I don't know what has happened. And I hope that it is not this government that has happened to education in Barbados that makes it so problematic. We need to fortify the future with sustainable data-driven policies and programs. And I challenge this government to restore the terms leave for teachers. It became an issue in the last few days or weeks. This question of terms leave, that needs to be restored. There's burnout, there's fatigue. I once went to a secondary school to give a guest presentation. And I came away and I said, the teacher that doesn't come home burnt out, fatigued, really is not doing the job. I mean, it's the most difficult thing I'd ever done. The most difficult thing for a teacher to go there every day and to experience that, it's not easy. Salaries. Teachers need to be better paid, not only teachers, but policemen and probably nurses. Well, not probably. We need to increase counselors and school workers, social workers in all schools, implement early intervention programs, integrate continuous assessment, and that is not to do injury to the 11 plus or the structure of the 11 plus. We need to provide career and academic paths at the upper end of the secondary institution. We need to strengthen the National Youth Service. I understand that this government has had a youth policy lying down dormant for over 2 years. Nothing has emerged. Revisit the curriculum at Erdiston Teachers Training College. Later on, you will hear me say something about the BDS sports program. Its disbandment has been a major mistake made by this government. And so, Your Honor, those are my submissions as they relate to education in this country. It is too important to become a distant cousin of success, and we ask this government to pay serious attention to education in this country. Ranking second to education is health. Government's expenditure on healthcare has declined over the years from $347.7 million in 2012 to 2013 to $327.7 million. Can we imagine that? Can we in Barbados imagine that the allocation to health has declined? This continued decline in the government spending on healthcare by and large underscores the constant outcry by the public about the quality of healthcare delivery in the country. In short, people are dying in A&E, and people are dying in A&E because the system there is deficient. We don't blame the people who work in A&E. We blame those who have designed the system. And so the crisis at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital needs to be resolved. The QEH remains overburdened with patients forced to wait days for treatment due to administrative problematics. That's the way I would put it. And despite the government's repeated promises, healthcare delivery continues to deteriorate, with Barbadians paying the price for the administration's failure. The price of that failure is death. I am hearing too many reports of people dying in A&E. People used to die with dignity on the ward, or they were sent back home and died there. Why are so many people dying in A&E? Why is there a problem that can be fixed that is not being fixed? I am standing a few feet away from the junior minister in health, and I would hope that he would devote some of his time that he is allocated when the time comes to tell the people of this country, using his privileged position since his senior minister is in the other place, but ironically a part of a duumvirate. His senior minister is the second most powerful person in this government. I have said this last year, I'm saying it again. That is one of the ironies of government in this country, that the second most powerful person in government is a senator. And when the reshuffles are coming, people are beating down his door asking him, save me, save me, save me. I don't wish to go. And he talks to the person in charge, and their lives are saved. The government has ignored the needs of the polyclinic network, which lacks critical diagnostic equipment such as X-ray machines, ultrasounds, and proper lab testing facilities. I will go quickly. I know they're getting tired. The government continues to underfund healthcare allocating a mere 2.71% of GDP to the sector, far below international recommendations. Despite imposing new health levies on taxpayers, there has been no tangible improvement in service delivery. Meanwhile, the budget for non-communicable disease prevention, a major public health issue, is an embarrassing $423,000 for the entire country. And this government is known every week for talking about NCDs. You can't hear your ears unless somebody talks about NCDs, but talk, no action. $423,000 dedicated to the NCD crisis. Harrison Point, failure to utilize Harrison Point. There seems to be some doubt as to what ought to be the future of the Harrison's Point facility. The healthcare workers are overworked and understaffed. I'm aware that we are losing a lot of our nurses to emigration. I'm aware that we have brought nurses from Cuba. I've asked the foreign minister to let his voice be heard over the next few weeks in resolution of that crisis. But we're bringing nurses from Ghana, and still the problem has not been solved. There's neglect of elderly and dental care services. Our old people are suffering because this government is reducing the allocation on health. It is as serious as that, sir. This government is reducing the allocation on health. But I paid homage to my party today, and I am grateful to be given the opportunity to speak not for myself but for a party. And I'm happy to share with this public of this country what are the Democratic Labour Party's solution for a new vision for healthcare. That there will be proper investment, and by that I mean not only financial but manpower, human power investment in healthcare to at least 9 to 11% of GDP to meet the needs of the population. The figure that I referred to earlier, 2.71%, is woefully inadequate. The DLP will fix the primary care system, fully equip polyclinics with diagnostic tools and essential emergency care resources to reduce pressure. That is logical. You want to reduce the pressure on the QEH. I've heard even this government, through some of its ministers, claim that, or not claim, validly tell the population, ease the pressure on the A&E, go to the polyclinic. So I can't entirely criticize the government for that failure. Everybody knows that it is the sensible thing to do. But the Democratic Labour Party will institutionalize that system. Restore proper hospital administration. Look, this hospital has been mired in political intervention. We now have another Superman up there. I don't want to offend him, but I wake up every morning wondering why this government cannot invest in our people. I am not xenophobic. I love my country. And loving my country is not loving beaches, trees, and buildings. It is loving the people. And we have capable and competent people in this country and in this Caribbean who can do the jobs for less than we're paying super people. Yes, the people of this country are entitled to indignation. They're entitled to express that indignation. What is wrong with this government? Why the self-doubt? Why the negation? What is this magic that needs to be done at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital? Is it the same magic that was done at the BTMI before it was rescued? And this government sits silently, as if they've discovered something that mankind had not seen before. A lot of competent people. I said it before. First degree, second degree, master. Well, second degree is the masters. PhDs, all up and down this world, some having originated in this country. And again, the phrase, oh, we're going to hide hunt. I thought I was reading Phantom. Somebody's hate hunting, and you come with a Superman, and he will solve all the problems that exist on the Barbadian landscape. Look, try and get some Barbadians or Caribbean people back at that hospital. This is cultural work. And cultural work cannot be properly and effectively done unless you have people who are immersed in that culture. And this is not to disqualify a Barbadian from working in England. This, however, is to protect the Barbadian aspirant in this Barbadian environment. Continue on your merry way, government. You are losing the confidence of the people who installed you where you are. As we said, we are going to make Harrison Point work for Barbadians. Convert Harrison Point into a secondary hospital to ease the burden on QEH. We are going to expand the wellness and preventive care, increase funding for non-communicable disease prevention, implement community health programs, and nutrition education. The Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central spent some time yesterday on nutrition. I applauded it, but when it became the central feature of the budget, my applaud ceased. And that was not literal applause. I commended quietly any initiative that is aimed at promoting good nutrition. We are joined on that. And a Democratic Labour Party government will strengthen elderly and dental care services. There's a lot of suffering, you know. When old people have problems, dental problems, they suffer very badly. And we will ensure proper funding for geriatric care facilities and expand affordable dental services. There is a time for change. There is a time for change. And I'm not speaking of the general change. If it is God's will, that will come. If it is God's will. But there's a time for change within the health system that safeguards the well-being of the old people in this country. We must not discard them to inefficiencies in health. Let us protect our old, vulnerable population. Permit me, Your Honor, to come to this thing called international business. And I have something to say on it. It's going to be very short. Going to be very short. The public does not know that international business, the presence of international business is responsible for at least 65% of the total taxes collected on incomes and corporations in this country. It's as important as that. And we have a duty to protect it. And I wonder sometimes if we are doing enough, or if the government is doing enough to protect it. At least 95% of the companies involved in international business are from Canada and the USA. And I urge the Honorable Member for St. James Central to find himself traveling less and attending to that emerging crisis between Canada and the USA. There may be implications. There may be implications. And I've already given notice of the rumblings that we are about to lose a significant presence of an international business from this landscape. I will try not to raise my voice though, when I tell the people of this country that this Barbados government is paying a French tax advisor to the Prime Minister. I'm going to surprise every member of this government now, because the members of this government do not know what is happening at the top. They do not know. And I started on the theme, show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. We are paying, and I say we, this government is paying a French tax advisor to the Prime Minister $1 million US a year. And the faces are surprised. The leader of the opposition has to bring information to the members of the government. And some of them vex. Some vex, some surprised, some indifferent. $1 million US, $2 million Barbados dollars. And we got a lot of people in this country that can give the same advice. So that when I speak of self-negation, it wasn't only BTMI, it's not only the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. There's a general trend that this government is rejecting its own qualified people. We have people qualified in this country to give the same advice and possibly better advice. Tax advice. Why you think we've had all these international business companies around here being serviced by Barbadians who are capable and competent to give the same advice and better advice? And we picking up $1 million belonging to the taxpayers of this country and given to a French tax advisor. I asked the question, do we have any tax advisors available locally? The answer is yes. Why aren't we using them, government? And I'm not addressing this to the members of this cabinet who have just found this out. They are as upset as the rest of Barbados. But it does not mean that the rest of Barbados will save them. Because as a cabinet, they become complicit. It is called collective responsibility, and every member of this cabinet is now collectively responsible for the fact that we are paying a French tax advisor $2 million per year to do something that a Bajan can do. And if they doubt me, I can tell them where his money comes from. Because this government has a way of shifting around money across various departments. As I said, we gathering got about 3 or 4 ministries, funneling, regathering money here and there, hiding money all over the place to pay to people. I will educate this government, the members of this cabinet, further, and tell them that the $2 million paid to that French superman is paid out of Invest Barbados. Y'all didn't know? Y'all didn't know? $2 million a year. One said, my God. And he has an Italian consultant who is paid to write the legislation. So we have a Frenchman advising the government. On tax. And he has brought an Italian to write the tax laws or to rewrite the tax laws. He isn't writing it in Italian. He's writing it in English. And this government has a department up there called the CPC, Chief Parliamentary Council, who I hear ministers coming in here and praising every week. Is it patronizing? The Chief Parliamentary Council is qualified in legislative drafting. And that young lady is well capable of writing the legislation. It is not the reinvention of the wheel. And the Italian consultant who is writing in English is paid by BRA. So the $2 million genius is paid by Invest Barbados, and his hireling, who is writing the legislation, is paid by BRA. Why? Why? Why are we meandering our way through various government departments to pay bills when those bills ought not to be paid in the first place? When we can find a Caribbean person or a Barbadian to do what they are expensively doing, presumably on the behalf of the public. We have a complement of tax advisors in this country. We have a heavy complement of legislative drafters who can do what they're doing. But this government insists on these acts. Well, let them continue, as the old people say, let them do and do till they can't do anymore. I come to the tax rate, sir. The government moved the tax rate from 2.5% to 9%, and that resulted in the flight of some of the companies. And that, of course, further resulted in job losses. Let me say something about energy, though. And I cite here today that the fourth of Dubious questions asks about courage. And the political enterprise is not justified unless one comes with courage. And somebody has to have the courage to ask about the relationship between government and the Barbados Light and Power. Because that problem of electricity bills that are too high seems not to be disappearing. And I have previously made reference to an estimates debate in which I asked a former energy minister, can we expect cheaper electricity bills? And he paused and said, that is the intention. He paused and he gave that answer because he is a lawyer and he is a clever lawyer. And when I use the word clever, that is not synonymous with tricky. He knew why he was doing that. He knew that he was doing that because those matters were beyond his control. And I'm saying to this country that there is an unresolved issue as to the nature of energy that this country will pursue, whether it is fossil fuel or renewable. And that the government's relationship with Barbados Light and Power seems unable or unwilling. The government in its relationship with Light and Power seems unwilling or unable to reach a situation in which the government can negotiate a better deal with Light and Power. But of course, it is open to the government to say, well, look, we have a Fair Trading Commission, and it is the Fair Trading Commission that sets prices. But as I said in here a few weeks ago, while the Fair Trading Commission sets prices, the government in its sovereign power as cabinet, an arm of the state, sets policy. And that policy may touch and concern the Barbados Light and Power. The question then becomes, is government doing enough in its relationship with Barbados Light and Power insofar as policy is concerned? Is the government doing enough to protect and defend the interests of the consumer, or is the government partial towards Light and Power? Simple question. Simple question. Government is here to represent. I told the honorable member for Christchurch East today something that apparently he did not know. That when he is in here, he is a member of parliament for his constituency. And he did not know that. He thought that he came in here because he's a member of cabinet. Well, somebody hold him quickly and tell him that he goes to cabinet because he's in here in the first place. Please hold him and tell him. something has to be done. Something has to be done in terms of electricity prices. They're too high in this country. Too high. And the people of this country feel aggrieved that the well-to-do have had access to the grid in terms of their photovoltaic systems, and the little poor fella cannot now get access to the grid. Something is wrong. And from the mouth of the member for Christchurch East Central yesterday, there's some new company that will be established, I presume and assume, to sell electricity to other persons outside of Light and Power. I don't know for sure. But what I know for sure is that this government brought legislation here a few months ago to remove CAIPO, C-A-I-P-O, that's the acronym for Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, to corporatize what was previously a department of government and to make that a separate entity, which will be run by a board and a CEO. And at the time, I asked the government to explain for the people of this country Section 8. I never forgot it, Section 8.1b of the legislation. I've never seen or heard the likes of it. And Section 8.1b of that legislation say that a chairman of that entity, I think they call it Business Barbados, a chairman in relation to the management of contracts may remove the management of contracts from the CEO and the senior staff, take that contract unto himself or herself and deal with it. So that when I use the word corruption, people thought that I was talking about stealing money. I am talking about the abuse of power, and this institutionalizes the abuse of power. That you allow by legislation a CEO to enjoy the discretion of removing executive powers from a CEO, taking those executive powers unto himself or herself for management of contracts. You know what management of contracts involves. Money, hiring people, hiring contractors expensively. So the CEO is out, the board is out, the chairman. I have never seen legislation like this, and if it exists, please show me the precedent. This should not happen. What kind of contract will you have there that the chairman says, give me this one. I want this one to deal with. The people of Barbados need to start to understand how this government is functioning in relation to its public entities. That not only is there wastage, but there's leakage, and that the wastage and the leakage now becomes institutionalized by legislation. The utilities regulation legislation. The utilities regulation legislation is that legislation, as the word implies, as the phrase implies, regulates utilities in this country, the light and power and the telephone and the water. The one of greatest importance, obviously, is light and power. We've had in this country a very successful history of the telephone people having their prices controlled. Prices have actually dropped. When cell phones first came out, you were paying, I think, $2 a minute. That doesn't happen anymore. People pay a fixed thing, and there's no mystery or magic to cell phones any longer. But the light and power remains, as the name implies, a very powerful entity that is fixing rates, except that they must refer the fixing of those rates to the Fair Trading Commission for review, so that if they want to increase, they must go to the Fair Trading Commission. But this government changed the legislation not once but twice to give the minister discretionary power to determine whether matters of rates increases should go to Fair Trading Commission. It was an intervention. A minister now becomes the interloper. The minister now becomes the quasi-judicial body that is capable of influencing electricity rates, utility rates. I focused on the electricity company. That legislation pertains across the board to all utilities. The point I make is that the government has found itself on a trajectory by way of amendment of legislation that now gives the minister greater power in relation to utility rates. And that has great importance when it comes to electricity rates, which everybody in this country knows are too high. That's an objective criticism. Electricity rates are strangling households. Electricity rates are strangling businesses, and businesses, obviously, in pursuing the profit motive, will pass those high electricity rates onto the consumer, and therefore the electricity rates will drive inflation. The electricity rates are at the heart as a driver of inflation. It is not only tariffs. Around the necks of the people of this country. And when I say the people of this country, both corporate and human, and something must be done. Some resolution must be found in relation to high electricity rates. Some resolution has to be found, and no government can maintain its credibility. No government can call itself a worthy government unless it can influence by way not of judicial intervention, but by way of policy. Work something out. Work something out that will help the consumers in this country. We are not asking to impoverish light and power, but we want to strengthen consumers. We want people to pay less for their electricity bills. And we thought that renewable energy was the way, until we discovered that the technology is not as we, in our naivety, thought that the sun shines on your photovoltaic system and into the house, and you can turn on the lights and run the fridge and the air conditioning until the Messiah returns. No, it is not like that. We discovered that there's something called battery storage, and that you have to store the energy that you get from the sunlight. And we discovered that the grid at Light and Power is full, and that some people who invested in photovoltaic systems, or who thought to invest in photovoltaic systems, cannot now so invest. That it is futile. That, as they told Mary and Joseph, there's no more room in the inn. And the stable of inflation is oppressive. It is most oppressive. Something has to give. Something has to be done. Are we as a country going to commit entirely to renewable energy? Or do we risk fossil fuel upon the eventuality that it will become cheap or cheaper, with the occasional increases? And one of our senators has championed the cause for the reduction of fuel prices over the years, and I want to commend him for that, as indeed has Senator Worrell dealt with the matter of health in shadowing that ministry, and doing so in a way that is admirable and nothing short of admirable. But where's the consumer in relation to high electricity bills? And as I've said, the consumer is both corporate and domestic, corporate and human. Nothing seems to be happening that is in the interest of the consumer in this country. And I came in here a few weeks ago and charged this government with misrepresenting the interests of the consumer. And I recorded the dialogue. I recorded it. In one of her rare visits to Barbados, the Prime Minister came in here, having heard that I had, a few minutes earlier, accused the government of being in bed with light and power. And I have a right to say that. And beyond the right, I had the courage to say it. It was an accusation leveled at the government, not at light and power. And here's what the Honorable Prime Minister said to her colleagues in my hearing. Tell me, I quote, tell me, and I don't, in fact, I'm going to ask him. I remember it well, it's on the video, there is a video that went around Barbados. Standing between the honorable members for, I think, and St. Peter. Yes, right out there. Tell me, in fact, I'm going to ask him and put him to the point. A government that is embedded with Barbados light and power would got the light and power waiting for a license for 6 years. Now that was very interesting. And I think the Honorable Prime Minister knew that it was very interesting. And therefore she knew, the Honorable Prime Minister knew that she quickly had to add, as we follow the law and the processes. Now, when we deal with the first portion of that sentence, a government that is embedded with light and power would got light and power waiting for a license for 6 years. Is the grant of a license a punitive measure? Is it? Does this government function in a punitive way when it comes to the grant of licenses? I will move on to the second question that the learned and Honorable Prime Minister asks. A government that is embedded with light and power could got light and power waiting for a decision or a rate increase that it has not had in over a decade. It doesn't even make sense, said the learned and Honorable Prime Minister. That second question reveals so much. I repeat it. The Honorable Prime Minister was asking me if a government that is embedded with light and power could have light and power waiting for a decision on a rate increase that it has not had in over a decade. The government does not. The government is not responsible for giving decisions on rate increases. That is the legal responsibility of the Fair Trading Commission, unless, of course, the Prime Minister was unwittingly admitting that, or saying, I'm not going to say admitting, unless the Honorable Prime Minister was saying by implication that the Fair Trading Commission is subject to political influence. And I hope the Honorable Prime Minister was not saying that. But the Honorable Prime Minister asked me the question, could you say reasonably that I'm in bed with them and the government has them waiting for a decision on a rate increase? It is not the government's function. It is not. It is the Fair Trading Commission's function. And as I said before, and I ask again, was that a statement of influence by this government over the Fair Trading Commission? I say no more on that. I say no more on that. I will now concern myself with the fact that we are paying a lucky Italian man $2 million a year to give this government tax advice, and we are paying his hireling a large sum of money, an Italian, to write tax laws in English. I will be very brief on foreign affairs and foreign trade. And because I'm brief, does not mean that I will be anything other than brutally honest. It is rare that we ever hear the Honorable Member for St. James Central speaking independently in his own right as Minister of Foreign Affairs or Foreign Trade. I dare to call him the de jure Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. He's de jure. It was a matter of some very public regret when the Prime Minister voiced opinions on the Russia-Ukraine war. It became something of a joke in the social media domains. And it was a matter of some public regret when the Prime Minister unnecessarily voiced opinions on the crisis in Gaza, compromising, probably, potentially, our national interests, and this is now my opinion, for the sake of a personal crusade. And that is not an unfair opinion or judgment, because there are a lot of people in this country that believe that the Prime Minister is on some personal crusade for some prestigious job within some international institution. People say it every day. And the Prime Minister must defend against that. And if it is true, it is an injustice committed to government in this country. Because we have never had a Prime Minister who has either openly or subtly campaigned for a job within the international forum. I do not know of it. And so we are prepared to give the Honorable Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt and to say that we believe that the Prime Minister is committed exclusively to Prime Ministership and leadership of this country. And we want the Honorable Prime Minister to come and tell Barbadians that she is not interested in any job within any international agency. Too many people speak about it, and I am going now to blame those people and ask them on behalf of the Prime Minister of this country, please do not accuse our Prime Minister of having ambitions within any international agency. It's unfair to the Prime Minister. It really is unfair to the Prime Minister. And so when the Prime Minister involves herself in dialogue relating to Russia and Ukraine war and to the crisis in Gaza, unnecessary as it is, please stop accusing the Prime Minister of doing this as part of a personal crusade to assume leadership of an international agency. You're being unfair to the Prime Minister. And if that were so, if that is so, you are saying to the Prime Minister that she is less than committed to the affairs of this country. We know that the Prime Minister is well-traveled. We know that. But is that sufficient evidence of a lack of commitment to the affairs of Barbados? Even if that is expensive travel? Even if the costs of that travel remain undisclosed? Even if this country is not told that the Prime Minister has left and that we find out only when we come in here and refer to the Honourable Member for St. Michael's Southeast as the acting Prime Minister, that is what public life in Barbados has reduced to at this point. That a Prime Minister now leaves this country often, and GIS is not activated to tell the nation of Barbados today, and Barbados Advocate in the good old days. Every time a Prime Minister leaves the country, the people are told it is not a courtesy, it's a protocol. And I dare say, it accords with constitutional rule. This country must not be without a Prime Minister, either full-time or deputy acting Prime Minister. That is within the constitution of this country. So that when we have a Prime Minister leaving the country and the people are not told, you are putting constitutional rule at risk. The people of this country must know who is the Prime Minister every minute of every day. And we don't have to come in accidentally to Parliament to find out who is Prime Minister. So I say not only is it a breach of a courtesy, it is a breach of a protocol, and it is an offense against the Constitution of this country when the citizens do not know where the Prime Minister is, when she travels, when she leaves, when she comes back, and too many jokes are being made against your Prime Minister unfairly. Unfairly, perhaps, because of these travels, but if there is any blame that the Prime Minister must take, please tell us. Please tell us when you're at the airport and where you're going and when you come back and what you brought back and what the loan was for. And after you've brought it back, have you spent it in the manner stipulated by the lender? Please tell us. So too much is going on in this country, Honorable Member for St. James Central. That is wrong. Too much is going on. That is wrong. And it is going on while the Honorable Member for St. James Central struggles to function in the office in his right as Minister of Foreign Affairs de jure. But here's what we want to hear from the Honorable Member for St. James Central. And I told him earlier today that we want to hear his voice on the matter of the Cuban crisis, the health workers crisis. We want to hear him justifying the presence of these expensive embassies across Africa, Kenya, Ghana has one. Man, the boys living sweet. The boys are living sweet. And Dubai. And Dubai. And the Honorable Member for St. James Central is not nervous. He is known for a life of courage in his politics. And at some propitious hour, he is going to unleash and unburden himself on this public and say to this public that he agrees or disagrees with the presence of these many embassies across the globe, and that there's justification for them. They're expensive. We have a man in Kenya right now. Maybe he's listening to me. Good evening, sir. Or whatever time of night it is there. But he is down there. And what value is he adding to Barbados' international presence in Africa? Is he somebody's friend? We have to take off the gloves now. We have to ask about the spending of public monies when there's too much suffering in this country. And that's why I use the word unleash and unburden. Because this Honorable Member for St. James Central has a reputation for both unleashing and unburdening himself. And anyone who gets in his mighty way is demolished for a vocabulary that is extensive and on occasion lethal. And he will tell us about these many embassies. Kenya, Ghana, which is tomorrow, which is probably justified because of the cultural links between Barbados and Ghana. But the one that raises curiosity, Honorable Member for St. James Central, through you, sir, is Dubai. What is this Dubai thing about? What is this Dubai thing about? And I apologize to the honorable member because on Friday I could not be here. And it was not a deliberate absence. I genuinely could not have been here. And I was sorry that I did not seize the opportunity to ask you that question. But they will give you some time to speak. And the people of Barbados await your explanation, honorable member, through you, sir, as to what brings this little country onto Kenyan soil and onto Ghanaian soil. I'm going to finish just now. And most curiously, onto the soil of Dubai. This morning, or earlier this afternoon, it felt like this morning to be honest, I saved this government information that was potentially embarrassing to this government. I am not without some compassion, and the public may well find fault with me for that sense of compassion. And I'm not going to speculate on Dubai as to why we need a mission there. And the honorable member for St. James Central knows, or may know, and to be fair to him, he may not know why we have an embassy in Dubai. He may not know. But there are people in this country who know. They are. And please, honorable member, through you, sir, do not become nervous. Do not become nervous. No need to take legal advice to your left. And if that were not enough, we're hearing about Morocco. We're hearing that an embassy is to be opened in Morocco. So we're all across the African continent. We're dallying across the African continent. All these expensive missions for what? What is the value? Honorable member for St. James Central, through you, sir. What is their value? Please let the honorable member unleash and unburden himself and tell the people of Barbados what his conscience may be willing to say. Because he is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And we will find out what is the extent of foreign trade between Barbados and Kenya. What is the extent of foreign trade between Barbados and Ghana? There is extensive foreign trade between Barbados and Ghana because our nurses, several of them are coming from Ghana, and we favor Ghana for its cultural links. But Dubai, and then Morocco. Shall we tell the truth about Dubai this afternoon, tonight? Shall we tell the truth about Dubai tonight? And shall we tell that truth at midnight? Or can we tell it at 14 minutes past 10 in this night? In Barbadian parlance, they're frightened. They're frightened. They're frightened. Don't mind the noises. They are afraid. They are afraid. Sit comfortably, friends. Sit comfortably. Sit comfortably. I will give you yet a little more time. Let me see how you will compose and comport even yourselves. But the questions about Dubai loom large. They loom large. And this seventh child of humble parents still is not without some compassion. And so I will let you rest a little easier. A little easier. No, it's not drama. It's not drama. And you know why I'm not saying it? Through you, sir? You know why I'm not saying it? I don't have anything? Because some of them are innocent. Some of them are actually innocent. Some of them are actually innocent. But the public of Barbados, a time comes very soon when Dubai will reveal itself. The Dubai experiment, the Dubai expedition will reveal itself soon and very soon. Soon and very soon. I press on. I say to this country that with the events in North America, a foreign minister who is interested in his reputation and credibility will find himself flying at lower altitudes, not from here to Europe and the other celebrated capitals of the West and the East. They've gone far at public expense. Nobody knows how much it costs. Nobody begrudges you these trips, government. But I'm encouraging you now to fly at lower altitudes and to try the Caribbean, because there's a crisis looming. There's a crisis looming in our relations with North America. And we have to resolve that regionalism must rank with greater importance if this region is to survive. The conflict, the tariff wars, and more than the tariff wars, the cultural wars within the Northern Atlantic. I come to aspects of the Prime Minister's office, and I'm not going to repeat what I said last year about the heavy spending by the Prime Minister's office. It continues. Let the public be aware that the heavy spending by the Prime Minister's office continues as it did last year. And that the heavy spending continues on travel. And that Barbadians are not being told, as they are entitled to be told, what is the extent of that spending. How much is it costing the Barbadian taxpayer to fly these honorable men and women across the globe on trips that are not necessary? I'm not going to dress it up with subtlety. A lot of these trips bring no value to this country. These excursions are conducted at the expense of the people of this country. That is the financial expense. And we're not being told, because this government believes that it does not have to give account. And I've heard in here the honorable member for Christchurch East Central, when I questioned the expenditures on overseas travel. He's a member, the honorable member is a member of the Ministry of Finance. And he told the people of this country that some of that money goes on the library, some goes on the BDF, and he called about 3 or 4 areas of expenditure. I want the people of Barbados to ask the question, are the people of Barbados entitled to know all aspects of government spending? Are the people of Barbados entitled to make a judgment as to whether that spending is justified? Or are the people of Barbados irrelevant within the public affairs of this country? Must we live in a country in which that information is kept distant from the taxpayers of this country, to whom the monies belong and are held merely by government as a trustee? There are several lawyers in here and they know what is a trustee. A trustee holds the money for and on behalf of the beneficiary. In this relationship, the taxpayers constitute the beneficiary, and the trustee must do nothing unless the beneficiary has his interests safeguarded and protected. The people of this country, after 1 year of inquiry, still do not know what is this government's travel bill. What I can tell the people of this country is that one flight to New York to the Rihanna dinner cost the taxpayers of this country $120,000. And they didn't take everybody in this parliament. And I can see the looks of discomfort. I'm not going to identify any of you who went. Relax. Relax. They're not going to kill y'all who went. They're not going to kill them. But one or two, sir, boarded a private jet and flew merrily through the skies to Rihanna's dinner in New York, and it cost the taxpayers of this country $120,000. What a merry band of lucky men. And the welfare department is underfunded. Because the honorable member for St. Michael South told me in here 2 weeks ago that he does not concern himself with funding to the welfare department, and he does not do so with worry. He said that he can come back and get supplementaries. But the people of this country need to understand how this government, as trustee, is spending the monies of the beneficiary, and that $120,000 took a few people to New York on a private jet, on a private excursion. I say it is private because what was the benefit to the government? Was it a diplomatic mission? No, it was not. It was a merry excursion. And if we are paying $120,000 to take a few merry men and women to New York, which is 4 hours away, how much does it cost when it goes to Dubai or Kenya or Ireland or London? As it does often, very often, government, very often. And the people of this country must sit quietly by and watch their hard-earned monies collected by this government spent on excursions to satisfy the opulent tastes of a few friends in government and outside of government. Who the cap fits, let him wear it. Man, the taxpayer, is so unjust. The taxpayer does not know who to trust in government. Does not know who to trust. But these disclosures are not forthcoming, and the people of this country are entitled to know. It cannot any longer be treated as a national secret. The people of this country are spending large amounts, and not the people of this country. The government of this country is spending large amounts of the people's money to luxuriate in metropolitan capitals. And it is the people's expense. And either it must come to an end, and if it does not come to an end, the people of this country have a right to know. The people of the United States of America know the cost of the last bolt on US Air Force One. They know the price to the last detail of US Air Force One. They know because they have a right to know. Show me a democracy and I'll show you a tyranny in the making. That was my theme. And that is why it is a theme that is consistent with the habits, practices, and policies of this government that is refusing to respect the people of this country in its expenditures and its wasteful expenditures. And every week or every fortnight, a private jet is landing at Grantley Adams. And it is nobody's private money. Tell the lady in the Bayland who is underfunded by the welfare department how much it costs. Doesn't matter if she can go through her representative for supplementary in February. It gets as serious as that. It is not a joke. The monies belonging to the people of this country are being squandered to satisfy lives of opulence members, government. And where does each conscientious member of this government stand in relation to that squander mania that has visited the financial affairs of this country? Never before did it happen. Why is it happening now? Show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. We have made a tyranny of governmental life in this country, and even some members of a cabinet do not know the business of the government. No joke. No joke. The people want to know. Tell the people, and tell them quickly. Because this government's goodwill has eroded substantially over the last few weeks and months. And while this government felt that it could thrive on political difficulties elsewhere, they no longer thrive, because this government is itself now afflicted with internal dissension, and they want to deny it. And their sycophants in the media, mainstream and social media, wish to minimize it. But it is there. When things don't align, the famous poem now, you have to resign. Is that not evidence of dysfunction within a government? And is there any greater dysfunction in government than the exchange between the honorable member for St. Michael East and St. John just a few weeks ago? And then there's the exchange that took place between the honorable member who spoke yesterday for Christchurch East Central. I heard all of it and I recorded it. And the honorable member for St. Michael Southeast, a famous exchange that took place in here last week. But there's no instability in the government. These analysts called upon to comment will say that the lady, oh, she will be sacrificed. That is his analysis of a deep governmental crisis. Oh, she will be sacrificed. She can't win her seat again. Rather than go to the heart of the problem that must have caused the young lady's departure from government, he is talking consequentialist philosophies. What will happen as a result of the departure, as opposed to focusing on what caused the departure itself. And that is how the fourth estate treats serious political issues of dysfunction and instability in a government. But we want to know. The people of this country want to know the state of life within this government. And if there's instability in government, it affects stability across this country. And they want to know, why is this government so resistant? Why is this government so intolerant in the search for information to which the people of this country are entitled? Why? What is the secret? Show me a democracy And I will show you a tyranny in the making. This government has made of itself tyrannical government. A government that has not to give account to the people of Barbados. A government that now feels that any question asked of this government represents an assault against the government, is an affront to the government. A government that has become intolerant to the simplest criticism. And the response to the simplest criticism is to excoriate the person who asked the question and to subject his image and reputation to the vilest defamation. But it is uttered here. It is uttered here. And we all have this thing called privilege here. But there's some who will not abuse that privilege. There's some who will not abuse that privilege unless what they're saying reaches an acceptable standard of dignity. There's some who will not do it. Even on that side, there's some who will not do it. But it does not stop me from asking on behalf of the people of Barbados and on behalf of the Democratic Labour Party that this government should be accountable in its public spending, accountable to the people of this country. Why the resistance? Are you doing something wrong? And if you feel that you're doing something wrong, stop it. Because that is not government and it is not good government. And if you are not stopping it and if you are not saying, the people become suspicious that you are doing something wrong. And when the people accuse this government of corruption based on what we lawyers call circumstantial evidence, the Honorable Member for St. James Central will tell you that a case can turn on circumstantial evidence. According to the best evidence rule, if you don't have a person who saw the killing, you can bring a person who saw the smoking gun. Circumstantial evidence. And the circumstantial evidence of corruption against, I repeat, the charge of corruption against this government based on circumstantial evidence is mounting. I repeat, the charge of corruption, I know it will make some uncomfortable, the charge of corruption against this government based on circumstantial evidence is mounting. Relax in your chairs. If the ride is rocky, if you're feeling the turbulence, if you are feeling the turbulence, tighten your seatbelt. You have to get some answers. And the people are going to set a deadline for you to give the answers. All right. All right. You came in very worried. Very worried. Why are you so affrighted? I am on the office of Prime Minister. Whole town, East Coast, Gemmots Lane, there is now an application to the Chief Town Planner of an application made by an entity called the African Export-Import Bank, a Frexim bank. An application has been made by that entity to develop lands on Gemmots Lane. I have a right to be wrong. And if I am wrong, tell me that if I say, and if I conclude, that the lands being dealt with are those lands that were formerly occupied by the Ministry of Education. If I am wrong, please tell me. Sit in your chairs, tighten your seat belt, Do not allow the turbulence to disturb you, and tell the people of Barbados whether the lands that formerly occupy the Ministry of Education are being transacted by a bank called the African Export-Import Bank for the construction of Afrexim Bank's Barbados-based African Trade Center. And tell the people of this country whether there is a resolution to be brought to this house at some point in time to vest. It isn't only Whole Town. It isn't only Whole Town. There is a resolution coming before this house. Tighten your seatbelts. To vest 2.037 hectares of land at the corner of Bay Street and Gemmots Lane, St. Michael, in the African Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, for the construction of the Afrexim Bank's Barbados-based African Trade Center. Marvelous. Marvelous. Don't interrupt me. Marvelous. You get your chance to speak, my friend. Marvelous. 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 Circumstantial evidence is acceptable? No, circumstantial evidence is acceptable. A few weeks ago, that same parcel of land was the subject matter of a negotiation between the government and a local entity. The government has resolved it by vesting through this parliament, this lawmaking body, this arm of the state, has now determined that the matter is resolved by the vesting of those lands in the Afrexim Bank. Tighten your seatbelts. Tighten your seatbelts. Don't curse me. Don't do a repeat of last year. I'm not backing down. Public record. So it is not only Whole Town. And let me come to Whole Town. Yes, you don't want to hear it. Shout me down. You don't want to hear it. I have the right to speak, and I'm going to speak. Control him, Your Honor. Control him, you hear? Everybody now jumping. Crop overs in here yet? You cool down, son. You jumping? You jumping? And you getting vexed and you're sucking your teeth at the speaker? Speaker, cool him down, sir. East Coast. I don't have to say much about East Coast. Back in the 1980s, the government of the day designated the East Coast as a heritage area of Barbados. And it must have been the agreement among the citizens of this country that the East Coast would remain that pristine property that almost became the collective property of Barbadians, to pass, and as we lawyers say, to repass. And under this government, these precious areas of heritage are being lost to the ordinary and the not so ordinary Barbadian. The rich and the poor now have no right of access to precious areas of land to which we had rights of access under previous governments, because this government has decided that those lands must now be treated with privacy to the exclusion of the public. Why are you so affrighted? Tighten your seatbelts. Control yourselves, government. And on every coast, there's rebellion. The West Coast, the East Coast. They mention South. Oystins. You read in my notes. Oystins, Your Honor. The same deal that has been done at Old Town is to be done at Oystins. That there's to be an exchange. That the Oystins Civic Center is to be removed to the other side of the road, and that we're going to use generic terms, tourism-related facilities. All that means is that some rich person is getting the land to build something big. That's all it means. And I can give early notice to this government. In fact, more than early notice, I will inform, I'm not speaking to this government anymore, I am informing the people of Barbados that there are presently moves being made to disenfranchise a particular landowner in Oystins of his commercial project. Not only Whole Town, not only the East Coast, the tentacles now stretch to Oystins. Show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. When I used that phrase earlier this afternoon, you thought I was joking? The evidence is there. And some of the evidence is direct. Control him, sir. And much of the evidence is circumstantial, but the evidence I give today is direct evidence. And many of you who do not know, many of them who do not know. Many do not know the destination of those tentacles called tyranny. Many do not know. I will accuse you of being innocent. But if you give condemnation after the fact of your knowledge, you have become complicit in the wrongdoing of this government. So that when I said this morning that the people of this country are confronted by corruption in government and by corruption and talking about the abuse of power, the naked and raw abuse of power to bring advantage to some and to visit advantage on others. Is that so difficult to swallow? Yes, it is difficult to swallow because you want to believe that you belong to something wholesome. Show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. And when they come to Oystins, the battle will be joined. Accuse me of acting and all kinds of nonsense. Oh, it's just an act. The people of Barbados acting. The people of Barbados who are trying to defend their patrimony, they're acting. It is just a play. It is a pantomime. Or do the people in this country feel genuinely offended that this government has stopped defending the interests of those who put them where they are, and chances are they will cease to be where they are by the will of the people acting under God. It is called betrayal. That this government has betrayed the people of Barbados. And those who carry some guilt about it, express your guilt in silence. I had the privilege of speaking to Mr. Stephen Lashley most recently. And he confirmed to me that he had to fight with UNESCO to have the area of the garrison designated as a heritage site, the garrison and Bridgetown. All of this pertains to the budget, my friend. Go and read the speech that you didn't read yesterday. All of this has to do with the budget. All of this has to do with government in Barbados. And Mr. Stephen Lashley had to fight against UNESCO to have that area designated as a heritage site. Greater Bridgetown and the garrison. And the people of this country now hear that the geriatric hospital and those historic buildings around the garrison are to fall under the destructive hammer of tyranny. And the phraseology will be repeated. Tourism-related facilities. And if there's to be any reminder, I got up here a few weeks ago and very gently asked the government to give the people of this country details on Whole Town. And I asked the government in whose name Whole Town was going to be vested. Hansard is there. And if you don't want Hansard, go on YouTube. And I asked this government in whose name was the land to be vested. And two ministers got up and said, the lands are being vested in BTI, Barbados Tourism Investment. The plot has thickened, and so has the transaction thickened. And I was told on behalf of the people of Barbados that the Insurance Corporation of Barbados Limited was lending one side 40, the other side 46. I have an excellent memory. That 40 or $46 million was being lent to BTI to construct tourism-related facilities at Whole Town. And in the aftermath of that disclosure, things seem to be rather different from what those honorable ministers told this parliament. And I talk about trust. And I talk about trust in a government. And I talk about the loss of people's trust in this government. And from Whole Town, we go to Bridgetown. And Mr. Stephen Lashley worked hard to have that designation. Is the government going to desecrate the designation of that area as a heritage site, which is intricately bound up with the tourism project in this country? Many of our tourists are heritage tourists, as we are heritage tourists when we go to London. Many of us. And are you going to desecrate a physical area and injure tourism in this country? And I don't want to say all for greed, but all for greed. All for greed. All for a deal. All for a transaction. All at the expense of the patrimony of this country. Is nothing sacred anymore? Is not the East Coast sacred anymore? Is not the area of the garrison sacred anymore? Or is it more important to put a geriatric hospital on a water table? Get vexed. Get vexed. The people vexed too. There is a stream, an underwater stream at Waterford on which that geriatric hospital is built. There is. So that when the citizens of this country protest, you will say that they're acting. You will accuse them of insincerity. You will say that their indignation is false. You will say that they're acting a part. Will you say that Whole Tongue means nothing to them? Will you say that the East Coast means nothing to them? Will you say that the area of the garrison means nothing to them? Is that what this government's escape route is about? Escaping from the real problems of this country by accusing people of being dramatic? The people are angry, Mr. Speaker. The people are angry. How will this government assuage their anger? With arrogance? With a refusal to meet the people who put you where you are, at least quarter of the way or halfway? And to establish what ought to be established, town hall meetings, before you go on these commercial escapades? Because that ought to have happened. The courts have recognized that these public developments on lands of this nature should not be done unless the people have fair right of audience with the government by way of a town hall meeting. And all that is going on at Whole Town over the past few days, precipitated by a young lady expressing her view in the Senate. And one should not comment on the business of the other place, but it was that speech that precipitated the protests. She was acting too. She was dramatic too. Was she insincere? And this government continues to act in defiance of legitimate public interest in this country. I don't know what price this government will pay. I'm not a soothsayer. I'm not a soothsayer. But the arrogance, the demonstrated arrogance even at this point in time, the smugness that now becomes evidence of the arrogance. This is not the first government that was arrogant. And it will not be the last government that will be punished for that arrogance. That you are desecrating sacred lands across this country and feel that you can do it with impunity. And feel that you must not and you don't have to refer those matters to the citizens of this country who you believe are beneath you, who you believe are worth nothing. And when they protest, oh, that is nothing serious. They're not serious. You don't have to take them seriously. Well, reflect that smugness. Reflect that arrogance. A time is coming. And you will have to give account. If not in the safe confines of this parliament where your numbers are dominant. If not in Bay Street where your numbers are unanimously dominant. If not there, you have to go into public places. Is that why town hall meetings are events that scare this government? That this government is afraid to face the people? This government is now afraid to face the people? The coy remarks and the smugness, all evidence of the arrogance that inheres within the bosom of this government, is alienating this government from the people of this country. And if you don't know it, something is wrong. And you sweep everything away as a joke. I spoke about travel in relation to the Prime Minister's office. I spoke of that trip to New York. And the last question I will ask of the Prime Minister's office is on the question of consultants. On the question of consultants. Are the people of this country entitled to know how many consultants are employed by this government across the public service? Are the people of this country entitled to know what is the wage bill for those many consultants employed across the public service? Are the people entitled to know? Or are the interests of the people irrelevant to the ways of this government? And if the interests of the people are irrelevant to the ways of this government, that is the best definition of governmental arrogance. And not for the first time is the public seeing it, and not for the last time will the public deal with it. It is a story. This government has become a story of expensive travel without account, expensive consultants without account, deals, commercial deals, using the power of Parliament, using the power of Bay Street to further the interests of a few at the expense of the majority. Show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. You thought the theme bore no relationship to what I intended to say today, this afternoon and into the night. And I'm not tired. I'm not tired. I am not tired. Tell the people how much the consultants are being paid. Roadworks in this country are being conducted as part of a partisan political design.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this chamber stands suspended until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Good.
The question is that this honorable chamber will be suspended until 12th day. 12th day. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until the 12th day of March, 2025 at 9 a.m. in the forenoon.